Today, let's delve on the topic communication and classroom interaction. And it's from the course Edu 103 Developments and Resources in Education Technology. Communication. Let's consider a very simple example for communication. Just imagine there are two students sitting in classroom. One boy and one girl, and the boy is with a black hair and the girl is with a long brown hair. Imagine that the girl suddenly turns to the boy and asks him, "Hey, how are you?" And the boy replies, "I'm fine." And boy asks her, "How do you do?" And the girl says, "Actually, I am working on my homework." And the boy says, "Oh, well, I am also." Well, we have seen a very simple communication. In this, you have seen that the girl initiates conversation and the boy responds to that. The person who initiates conversation is a central factor in the process of communication because that person sends message. And for the time being, we can use term center for that person. For our example, it's the girl who sends the message and she is the center in our example. Now let's consider the example further. The boy listens to the girl and the boy receives message from the girl. So the person, the boy who receives the message is the receiver. Two components we have seen, sender and the receiver. Sender sends the message, receiver receives the message. Communication is thus sharing our feelings, ideas and opinions with others. This can be intellectual, personal, spoken or written in nature. Communication is really important in our classroom. In our classroom, teacher instructs, sometimes gives directions, sometimes asks questions. And definitely students respond to that. Students may ask questions, students may interact with others and students may instruct each other. These actions all together happen in our classroom. So in our classroom, all these communications are regular. And in our classroom, there happens another communication too. When the students are in groups, they interact with each other. And they interact, they discuss, they learn lessons and they evolve into generalizations and conclusions. All these events are regular in our classroom. Now let's see etymology or word meaning of communication. The word communication is derived from a Latin word and the Latin word is communis, which means common. That is to share, exchange, send, transmit, write, relate and communicate. Other etymological source mentions that another word that is also Latin, that is communicare, and it is also derived from the language Latin and it simply means to impart or to participate. Now let's dwell on communication cycle in detail. We can recollect that communication is a process of exchanging verbal and non-verbal messages and is a continuous process. And one prerequisite is there and that is message. That message must be conveyed from the sender to the receiver. And during communication, it is very essential that the message must be understood by the recipient in same terms as intended by the sender. He must respond within a time frame. Thus, communication is a two-way process from the sender to the receiver and the message that is sent from the sender to the receiver. Now let's see main components of communication process. There are 7 factors that are involved in communication process and altogether these factors can be restricted into communication cycle. In a communication cycle, the first component is the sender. We have already seen that sender is the person who sends message. And the sender, whenever is sending message, the message is ultimately based on the views, background, approach, skills competencies and knowledge of the sender. And all these factors have great impact on the message. In the communication cycle, the second component is message. Message is the key idea that the sender sends to receiver. Sometimes we can modify this message into certain factors and the message can be converted into encoding, and this can be done by using words, graphics or any visual aids. In the communication cycle, the third component is encoding. Since the subject matter of communication is theoretical and intangible, it further requires some modifications in that part so that the receiver can comprehend the message easily. And for that, we need modification of these components, and that particular modification is known as encoding. Now, let's acquaint with fourth component, and that is medium. Medium is the means used to exchange the message. The sender must choose an appropriate medium for sending message from the sender to the receiver. And the receiver must understand that medium so that message comprehension is easier. Now let's consider the next important factor of communication cycle, and that is recipient. Recipient is a person for whom the message is intended. The degree to which the decoder understands the message is dependent upon various factors such as knowledge of the recipient, their responsiveness to the message, and reliance of encoder on decoder. Now, the next important factor of communication cycle is decoding. The person who receives the message or symbol from the communicator tries to convert the same in such a way so that he may extract its meaning to his complete understanding, and the whole process is known as decoding. The final and most important aspect of communication cycle is feedback. Definitely, feedback is essential because the encoder understands the message is transmitted correctly to the decoder only by feedback. By this, we end introductory aspects of communication and communication cycle. Have a nice day. Thank you.